All right, let's get this started. Welcome to the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour. If you are blind, I will tell you the theme for today, but it is witchy brews or potent potions, as I have named the class. We're going to be making witch-themed cocktails because it's Halloween, and I do it online, and we're doing a different theme every week, so here we go. We have 3 different cocktails. One has a very involved technique, one has a dangerous ingredient, the third has something really fun and interesting. But I want to start with the technique so that we have time for it to do its process while we're doing the rest of the class, so we can come back to it and y'all can see that it actually works. I really hate videos where it's like before and then after, and you don't see enough of the process to really believe that it's going to work. So the process I'm referring to is clarifying cocktails. This is a newer concept to me. I feel like it's bigger in some of the other major cities around the country, but where I live, it's not very big. Where I was working before the shutdown, it wasn't very big. But it is a really neat little technique where you take your cocktail, you add a clarifying agent, and then it comes out clear. Now, usually it'll still have a tint of color, but it's very, very transparent. So it looks really pretty. And then if you want to up your game and make clear ice, which we're not going to get into today, that's a whole other suitcase to unpack. But if you wanted to make clear ice, it's really neat to use that in a clarified cocktail because it's like an absolutely see-through cocktail, which is just wild. So for our clarified cocktail today, it's a cocktail I have named Bippity, Boppity, Boba. We are going to be taking a very, I want to say popular beverage that is taken usually in shot form during spring break. It's called a Washington apple. It's a very classic, well, I say classic loosely, not classic cocktail as in it's been around for hundreds of years, but it's very run-of-the-mill, ordinary, easy to find in a lot of different places. And it's got very simple ingredients. It usually has apple schnapps, apple whiskey, cranberry juice. I wanted to make it a little more grown up, and I also wanted to clarify it and see what happens. So we're making a riff on a Washington apple shot, turning it into a cocktail, clarifying it, and then adding boba to make it fruity. So what we're going to do, very, very simple. I'm going to walk you through the measurements. We're going to start the clarifying process, set it off to the side, and then come back to it. And then I already have a batch that's been clarified, and then you guys can see what it looks like. So for this cocktail, I'm going to tell you the way I like to do it. There's a lot of information out there on how to clarify different things. You can use things such as agar, which is like a gelatin type of substance that comes from seaweed. You can use dairy products to basically curdle your cocktail, which is basically what we're doing today. And then those curds that form and curdle it will help clarify the cocktail by essentially straining all of the solids out. So what we're going to do is in my little nifty mason jar, because I have a ton of these, I am in the South, we are going to make a double batch. There is no need to do this for one single cocktail. If you're gonna like it, you have to wait a while to have it, so you might as well make at least a double batch, if not more. The reason I'm making a double batch is because of the tools I'm going to be using. We will go over what else you can use if you don't have what I have, but I have the cheater easy version. You can get all high speed if you want to later. So for one cocktail, you're going to need 1 ounce of apple whiskey, 1 ounce of apple schnapps, 1 ounce of unsweetened cranberry juice. And this is essential. If you use sweetened cranberry juice or cranberry cocktail juice, you're not going to get the acidifying effect that you need to curdle and clarify this cocktail. And then to make it a little more grown up, we're going to be using Montenegro Amaro. But like I said, I'm doing a double batch. So instead of 1, I'm doing 2. So I'm going to do 2 ounces of apple whiskey. I'm using the apple Jim Beam. I know there's a lot of different brands out there that make it. Out of all the ones that there are, I actually find this one not as offensive. I'm not big on flavored whiskeys, but this one's nice. You could, if you wanted to, go ahead and infuse your own whiskey with apples. It would taste much, much better. But you're going to have to use apple schnapps anyway for this cocktail, so you might as well just use apple whiskey. It's going to taste really, really grown up, I promise. So we're going to use 2 ounces of apple schnapps, and as you can see, it is this obscene green color. If you find it in a different color, that's fine too. Clear would be ideal. Red would be good because we're using cranberry juice, which is red. If you have a different color than what I have, the final color of your clarified cocktail will change. So we have 2 ounces of apple whiskey, 2 ounces of this apple schnapps. And it is sour apple schnapps. It's not just regular apple schnapps. If you use just apple schnapps or even apple brandy, which I did try, because I was trying, like I said, to make this a very grown-up cocktail, it tastes too sweet. And then after clarifying, it just becomes flat. Because clarifying the cocktail actually kind of makes it more mellow just a little bit. And sometimes that'll make the flavors just be like, it's all right. So if you're going to go through all this effort, you might as well use bigger, bolder flavors. So 2 ounces of unsweetened cranberry juice. Pour that in there. And for one cocktail, you'd use a 1/4 ounce of Montenegro. So for this one, being a double, we're going to use a 1/2 ounce of Montenegro Amaro liqueur. I did try this with Averna. I didn't like the results as much. It was still very tasty. I encourage you to try it with whatever Amaro you have at home, but you do want to stay within the herbal caramel tone. I wouldn't really recommend it for Pari or anything like that, just because those flavor profiles are going to alter this cocktail dressing. So we have our mix, nothing special, just all poured into a jar. And then I have 2 ounces of milk. So this is whole milk. It's cold, but it's not like ice cold. I just got it out of my cooler. Would apple liqueur work as well? It could work. I just recommend something that's more on the tart side. So if it is a green apple liqueur, they tend to be tart. But some apple liqueurs are really, really sweet. In which case, you could do one of 2 things. If that's what you have on hand, I would recommend adding a little extra lemon to the cocktail on top of the cranberry juice, just to kind of counteract that sweetness. And I would add anywhere from a 1/4 to a 1/2 ounce per cocktail. But it does work better with sour apple, but apple liqueur would work just as well. It'll just have a slightly different flavor profile. So 2 ounces of whole milk. You can use cream if you would like. I don't recommend using lower fat milks because you need the fat to curdle so that you can strain this cocktail or clarify it. It's just out of my fridge. There's a lot of different concepts or ideas or opinions, on whether or not it should be warm, whether or not it should be room temperature or cold. Did a lot of experimenting. I thought cold was better. And there's also a lot of opinions on whether cocktail to milk or milk to cocktail. Now, after trying it out and hearing someone's justification, I'm going to agree with the crowd that goes cocktail into the milk. And the justification that I heard was that you're more likely to get more of your alcohol in contact with the milk because it all has to go into the milk. Whereas if you put the milk into the cocktail, it starts to curdle from the minute it touches the top. So it doesn't really get the full effect of it going down and kind of combining with the cocktail. Now, that could all be a load of crap. But in my experimentation, when I did milk to cocktail versus cocktail to milk, it didn't work out as well or as clear. So I'm doing cocktail to milk. And I'm literally just going to pour this in. I'll put it up so you guys can see. It's going to look absolutely gnarly. All right. So from far away, it just looks like a really terrible strawberry milk. But close up, you can see, hopefully, all of these terrible, gross little curdles. This is also why I loved this for Halloween, because it looks horrible, but I promise it's going to get better. This means you're doing good, guys. So once you have your cocktail curdling, there's another set of opinions on whether or not you should let it sit, whether or not you should do it immediately, how long you should let it sit. I'm here to tell you, just do it immediately. I honestly let it curdle and did it immediately, curdled and started straining it after 4 hours, 6 hours, and then overnight. I feel like if you're doing big batches, let it sit because those curdles take a little bit longer to form in ways that are easier to strain. They get firmer the longer they sit, but there's only so firm you're going to go. So when you're doing a smaller batch, anywhere below like 8 cocktails, I say do it immediately. But maybe you try that and don't agree, and then, you know, potato, it's fine. So how do we clarify a cocktail now that we have this curdled mess? So you'll hear a lot of people, if you start researching clarified cocktails, you'll hear talk about super bags and gold filters and fine mesh sieves and coffee filters, and they're all working. All of that works. Now, there are some things to note. Super bags, nut milk bags as well, yes. Nut milk bags, super bags. Some people use like really, really fine cheesecloth. Now, the problem with super bags or nut milk bags is that they're very expensive. And then what else are you using them for? Unless you live that lifestyle, which I don't make my own any kind of milk at any point in my life. Don't plan on it anytime in the future. So it would be a very expensive investment for something that I don't do every day. Then you have the cheesecloths and the coffee filters. Cheesecloths, it's really hard to find some that are really, really fine. And then when you do coffee filters, like those paper filters, you lose a little bit of your liquid. So not ideal. And then the gold filters are basically really fine mesh coffee filters. And they're very expensive and pretty when all you really need is a pour over coffee system. So if you are a big coffee person like me, or perhaps you like loose leaf tea, because this method also works for loose leaf tea, you're just gonna get one of these. I'm trying to think of the name of this right now. There's a name for it. It'll come to me. It's not an AeroPress. It'll come to me and I'll remember. But these have a fancy name, but I just call it a coffee pour over. A lot of people do. This one is glass. And this one I think holds 16 ounces. So I could do about 6 to 8 cocktails in here, depending on what kind of cocktail I'm making. And I chose this one because it has what looks like a regular coffee filter, but it's a very, very fine mesh. It's a little bit finer than the ones you find in a regular drip pot. After purchasing this, I think this cost me like $8, and I can use it anytime I want for a lot of different things. I will say the only thing I would suggest, this one tends to be very bulbous on the bottom, and the neck is really narrow, and that is a common design. However, when you have a very small amount of liquid, say we're only doing 2 cocktails like we are now, once it's clarified, it's an absolute pain in the butt to pour. So I would get a more tall and narrower bottomed version, but it still works. For $8, I'm really not that mad about it. So to clarify our cocktail, we're gonna put our filter in there. And then we're going to pour about 1/3 of this in there just to get a little layer of curdles. Now, a lot of people will tell you you have to do multiple strainings of this cocktail or to clarify a cocktail. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I have found, at least for this particular recipe, I usually have to do it twice, and I kind of cheat. So what I do is I let this kind of sit here and create a layer of curdles that are going to stay in the strainer. And then this part here on the bottom, this first strain is still going to be a little cloudy. So once that first little amount of the cocktail goes through and I have a layer of curdles, I pour that back into here and then just go ahead and strain the whole cocktail. And usually on that run, it's good to go. I'm going to come and bring it over so you can see what's going on. But we have a liquid that's straining on the bottom, and then we have this over here, which is the liquid, and it's going, once we get a layer of curdles, I'll show you guys what it looks up close. So that's all I'm using to clarify cocktails. There's no special bags, there's no expensive equipment, just multi-faceted things that are inexpensive and easy to use. So I'm going to set this off to the side and we'll come back to it. And we'll put the curdled cocktail mess over there as well. So pretend that that is not happening, because I know we're already curious. It's going to take a bit. So in the meantime, we're going to make some other cocktails. And then we'll talk more about clarification when we have more to show you, or I have more to show you. So my next cocktail that we're going to make is called Sitim Extinguere, which is Latin for quench your thirst, or thirst quencher. I can't remember exactly what I had to translate. But it sounds really spooky and like I'm casting a spell. I practiced all day and it still doesn't sound right, I'm sure, but it's very tasty. So for this cocktail, I wanted to create something that kind of felt like somebody was mad at you, because witches have a kind of a bad reputation for putting curses, you know, hexes on people they don't like. So kind of mad at you, but you still think they love you somewhere deep down. So it's a little bit spicy, but not crazy. And we're going to use a really fun ingredient called luster powder, also known as shimmer dust, fairy dust, all kinds of other stuff, not fairy dust in drugs. Fairy dust would be one used in culinary uses, but it is a really neat little powder that makes things look like they swirl and are marbled. You might have seen them in some cocktails. There's a few like champagnes that when you tilt the bottle, it gets all like swirly and pearlescent inside. So we can do that to cocktails without having to buy expensive alcohol, and it'll taste good. So for the Sitim Extinguere, we are going to make, you will need a cocktail shaker and a lot of ingredients, but it's worth it. We're going to use a 1/2 ounce of lime juice. We're going to use a 1/2 ounce of pineapple. And I know I always drive hard about fresh juices, but pineapple is notoriously fickle. It's either too acidic, too sweet. Sometimes it's perfect, and you don't know until you open it. So when I use pineapple juice, I usually use like the can. So we're going to use a 1/2 ounce of pineapple juice. And then there was a simple syrup that was put out in the flyer earlier this week with Korean chili flakes. Korean chili flakes are really nice. They have a really light bitter note to them. There's something almost smoky without being smoky, and I know that sounds crazy, but they have like a mustiness to them that's really appealing, and they have a warm heat. So for me, heat is all across the board different, right? Jalapenos are not the same as wasabi, and then like Asian peppers don't taste the same way Mexican ones do. And when I'm looking for heat in a cocktail, I want it to be warm. I don't want it to be so spicy that you can't drink it. It's kind of like ginger. Ginger sometimes can be a really nice note, but if you put too much, you feel like all of your sinuses are going to clear out. We're not trying to cure anybody's sinuses with this cocktail, just give you a nice little heat on your palate. So made this Korean chili infused simple syrup. We're going to use a 1/2 ounce of that. And then we're going to use raspberry liqueur. That's also a 1/2 ounce. And this is a really boozy cocktail. So if you are drinking it or serving it to people, just keep that in mind. Because it has the 1/2 ounce of raspberry liqueur. You're going to do a 1/4 ounce of orange liqueur or triple sec if that's what you have at home. 1/4 ounce right in there. And 1.5 ounces of tequila. I'm using silver tequila. I did try this with reposado, which is my preferred type of tequila, and it wasn't as good. It really kind of took away from the other ingredients really shining through. So for this cocktail, I do recommend silver tequila. Then we're going to use a little bit of saline. Hopefully you tuned into the DIY class where I showed everyone how to make a saline solution. We're going to use 2 drops. Then we're going to add an egg white because this is a fizz. Oh, before we do that, before we add the egg white, this is, let me see if I can get it over on camera. It's very, very hard to see, but this shiny, glittery red powder. There you go, kind of. I purchased this off of Amazon last year. It goes a long, long way. And it's usually used in like cake making or cookies. It is not the same as edible glitter. I will say that. Edible glitter has a coarser texture. So you want to look for luster powder, shimmer powder, and make sure it's edible. And usually you want to pair the color of your dust with the color of the cocktail. It works best. So if you have a green cocktail, you want to go with the green luster. If your cocktail is really pale in color, you could do a silver or white. But if you have, like this cocktail has like a rosy tint to it, then we're going to use a red shimmer powder. So I'm going to put, there's not really like an amount that I've figured out. It's just like however much I feel. But it's usually about 1/4 of a teaspoon, 1/8 of a teaspoon to 1/4 of a teaspoon. I did this as a fizz, so it does have egg white. I realized with the egg white, it needs a little additional shimmer powder. But if you're not using egg white, you can probably get away with a little less. So 1 egg white. Then we're going to dry shake this cocktail which means no ice. I like to shake it dry for about 10 to 15 seconds. If you can do more, do more. Your cocktail will be frothier and nobody's gonna be mad about a really good head on your cocktail. Everybody likes good head. Everybody's all about the good. All right, so now I'm gonna add ice to my sugar. And give another shake. Again, shooting for about 10, anywhere between 10 and 20 seconds. If you can go longer, go. All right. So I'm going to be serving this up, which means without any ice. I'm going to strain it. Put it into this cute little jar of glass. And then because it is a fizz, it will have the foam kind of rise to the top in just a little bit. So we're going to let it sit for a few seconds. To garnish this cocktail, I have these little chili threads, which you can also get on Amazon. You can find them in a lot of ethnic grocery stores. I found them in the Asian store. I've also found them in the African grocery store, but I feel like those are not as prevalent. And they also have them at Indian grocery stores. I could have just used chili flakes because that's what's in my syrup, simple syrup. I love it when the garnish echoes the cocktail. I really have a personal peeve with pointless garnishes, unless they're like for snack purposes. But I wouldn't put just like a parsley leaf on this. It wouldn't make any sense. So I like the chili threads just because they have a little bit more of a dramatic type of look than the chili flakes, which stay kind of flat. So I'll put a hefty amount right on top. The rest of the threads in there. Then I'm going to bring it over for you guys to see. So it's starting to have that foam rise to the top. So it's a bit of an ombre effect. And I'm going to set it off to the side. And then once it has the full head separated, I'll give it a little swirl so you guys can see the shimmer powder. I'm not sure how good it's going to be able to be seen through the Zoom, but I will be sure to take a video and post it with the Instagram post when the recipe goes up for your viewing pleasure. But that is a cheer or bless you. That's what it sounds like. All right, we're gonna put this over to the side as well. Let's see. For our next cocktail, okay. If you only watch on Facebook, you miss some of the most comical side commentary of all time. Specifically, Algie. She is very on point all the time with her very sarcastic and very well-timed remarks. And I love that she always times them to where I never see them when I'm supposed to. So then it's just like this awkward off screen. But yes, if you ever want to join us in the Zoom, the link is always posted on the Underground Cooking Club page for you to register for the class and then join us in here. For the next cocktail, we are going to be making something I'm super excited about. And I'm calling it 3 Broomsticks to the Wind. And it's both a tribute to puns, because I love puns and plays on words, and 3 sheets to the wind means you're very drunk, and then 3 broomsticks being one of the bars in the Harry Potter book. And I know a popular opinion because all kinds of things have been going on with that author, but I still enjoy the literature. So considering that, I named this cocktail 3 Broomsticks to the Wind. And I did a lot of trial and error. I wanted to make like a butter beer cocktail, right? Because everybody's heard about butter beer when Harry Potter came out. There's actual recipes for it because you can order butter beer at the Disney location where they serve it. And I just didn't like any of the recipes I found. They seemed very sweet, very cloying. There's a lot of butterscotch schnapps. There was a lot of vanilla vodkas, things I would just never drink. So I tried a bunch of different things. None of them worked. So scrap the idea of butterscotch. I tried using where there's original butterscotch candies. I tried using beer and making like a shandy. Just, I went all over the place. And then it was like, first of all, nothing says it's actually made with butterscotch. It just says it kind of reminds you of butterscotch in the book, but I said, screw it. That's for kids. A lot of people drink it. I'm gonna make a really adult version and butter some scotch. So I'm thinking this is a first for the pandemic pinup, but I'm doing a scotch cocktail. And I took butter and browned butter, which if you don't know what that is, when you take butter, put it on the stove over a low heat and melt it. And then if you've ever melted butter, you'll notice that there's kind of like a foamier top and a more liquid bottom. And that's the water separating from the protein solids. And then those solids on top that are like a foamy white will start to turn a little bit brown and have kind of a nutty aroma. And that is what's called brown butter. Used a lot in cooking. And I thought, why not bring it into a cocktail? So I made brown butter, put it into scotch, froze it so that I could remove the butter solids, but keep all of that flavor in the scotch, and then have buttered scotch, not butterscotch, buttered scotch. Because that's not confusing, right? So for this cocktail, we're going to use 2 ounces of buttered scotch. I'm going to be really sure to enunciate all of my words here. So 2 ounces of that. And then, considering it is in theory a buttered beer inspired cocktail, I needed to find a way to use beer. And I kind of, not all the time, but I kind of miss where I used to work. I really actually do. I really loved working at Culinary Dropout. And there was a cocktail on the menu called the Smashed Irishman, one of my favorite cocktails. And one of the ingredients in the Smashed Irishman is a cooked down Guinness. So it's not a syrup, it's just reduced down until it gets a little bit thicker in texture, more intense in flavor. And I honestly tried this with a couple other beers first, but Guinness just really, really worked. I tried it with Shiner, which is a bock that you find in Texas. Really nice flavor, but it just doesn't cook as well. I also tried it with a nut brown ale. I love cooking with those, especially in this season. Didn't work either. So we have a Guinness Reduction. The instructions on how to do that are also on the flyer this week. And we're going to use a 1/2 ounce of that and put it into the cocktail. We have a honey simple syrup, which is just equal parts honey and hot water. We're going to use a 3/4 ounce of that. And then to brighten it up, we're going to use a little bit of lemon juice. So it's a 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. And you may have heard that chocolate bitters are all of a sudden just really, really popular because Angostura came out with a chocolate bitters. Chocolate bitters have been around. I've honestly not worked with them quite often. And I couldn't find the Angostura ones. So I just have the Fees Brother ones, Aztec chocolate bitters. They're really nice. They don't work in everything, but they do work in some things, like this cocktail. So if you have chocolate bitters of any brand, we're going to go ahead and do 2 dashes. Put that in there. And then before we actually make the cocktail, we're going to talk about how to serve it. So this cocktail is servable in any glass with the garnish, which I just put grated chocolate on top of it. If you want to be dramatic, as I obviously like to do for the holidays, then you can get very creative. So I have this absolutely adorable little cauldron that I'm serving my broomstick candle or my broomstick cocktail in. And I'm going to be serving this over crushed ice, primarily to take up more volume. This is a really large glass. It's actually a candy dish. This would be very well suited for a tiki cocktail, but tiki cocktails have a lot more volume of liquid. This one doesn't. So I'm using a little bit more ice or smaller ice to take up more space so that it'll fill my glass a little bit better, or you could just make it double. But if you want to be dramatic, which we do, or I do, not only do you use awesome glassware, but you use awesome ingredients or dangerous ingredients in this case, which is dry ice. So, few words of caution about dry ice. I'm going to show you what I do. Not going to say this is what you should do. Do as I say, not as I do. So It can be very dangerous. Dry ice can burn your skin, and it is not a burn that you want. It's not something that's easily treatable at home and would most likely require medical attention at a hospital. So to avoid that, most people get specific gloves. You can use leather gloves. You can use gloves that are used for a lot of different other industries that have like that very thick latex coating and cloth on the back, or mechanics gloves, which tend to have like Teflon fibers woven into them. All of those would be appropriate. You want to use some form of protection for your hands. Thicker is better in case for some reason they don't work as effectively. So there's more of a layer for that ice to go through before it actually hits your skin. You will hear people tell you you can touch dry ice if you keep it moving. I'm not gonna take that risk. I like my hands, I need them every day. I don't feel like pretending I'm on Jackass and seeing how close I can get to not burning my hands. So use protection on your hands. What I'm gonna do is use oven mitts. That's what I have. I don't have any special gloves, but I do have thick oven mitts. So I'm using oven mitts for my dry ice, and I put my dry ice in a cooler bag or an insulated bag. And even though I'm using these, I'm still going to use tongs to get out the little pieces of ice that I want to minimize the amount of contact. So another note, if you go buy dry ice, it starts to kind of evaporate, which can create a lot of vapors that are not healthy for you to take in. So if you have it in your car, roll your windows down until you get to your destination so that you don't poison yourself in your car. You cannot put dry ice directly in your cooler. It will crack the plastic. It needs some form of a lining. You can put down a trash bag. You can put it in a thick plastic tarp, but you need something in your cooler. And you don't want it to be fully sealed because it can pop or explode, especially if it's one of those lockable coolers. So those are my tips on how to handle dry ice. And as where to get it, sometimes you have to go to these very special places. I'm really fortunate. They sold it at my grocery store for like 10 bucks. A lot of grocery stores have it. Give them a call, see if they do. If they don't, they usually can tell you where to go. Some Walmarts carry it as well. So if you're wanting to be dramatic, go get some dry ice, do what I'm going to do. Now let's make the cocktail. All that talk. So we have in our shaker, pour the 3 broomsticks to the wind, the 2 ounces of buttered scotch, the 1/2 ounce of lemon, the 1/2 ounce of reduced Guinness, the 3/4 ounce of honey, simple syrup, and the 2 drops of chocolate bitters. Fairly simple. I'm going to go ahead and put pebble ice or sonic ice in my little tiki glass over here, just so that it's ready to go. You know, a lot of ice. I think I measured it out, and this candy bowl, I think, holds like over 12 ounces of cocktail. So it's a lot of room. And you can tell I'm on like 4 sheets of ice. Okay, there we go. That's pretty cool. Okay, so we have our ice in our little glass. Put some ice in our shaker. And then you're going to shake it. About 10 to 15 seconds. All right. So, cocktail shaken, glass ready. I'm going to go ahead and strain this over my ice. It's this really pretty like milk chocolate color. And if you were serving this up, it's really nice. It foams on the top because the Guinness kind of tries to reconstitute itself. So if you ever actually put a heavier beer, reduce it down and put it into a cocktail, it'll make it frothy without the need of like an egg white or a thickener of any kind. And it's just really pretty. It doesn't hold as long as it would on the beer if it was freshly served, but it's a really nice little tidbit in case you didn't want to serve this over ice. It would go really well in a coupe. So we have the cocktail. And then we're gonna do our garnish. So I just have some baking chocolate. This is bittersweet. And then I'm gonna take a little microplane, zest some chocolate over it. And this is optional, you don't have to do this. I just really liked this idea. It gave it a really nice aroma. Kind of ties the chocolate bitters in really, really nicely. And then it's kind of like when your first sip hits your mouth, you get that chocolate first, so your brain is like, ooh, dessert, yummy. And then it gets all this alcohol and it's even more happy. So I also have this super cute broomstick I'm putting in my cocktail as a stir. And then we need dry ice. So here we go, guys. If you don't hear screaming, it means I didn't burn myself on a live Zoom class. But if I do, you'll learn how not to do this, right? So it's a lot harder with a club in it. All right. We have our dry ice. My dry ice came in a very large solid block, and I took a mallet and just kind of smacked it around a couple times to get smaller pieces. Oh, all right. There we go. You don't need a big piece. How big my piece is? It's not big. It's like a little piece of cheese. So put that down there. And then watch it. Oh shit. So the other thing to know, dry ice. See it? It's smoking, guys. So it would smoke more if it was in touch with the actual liquid. But because I have it sitting on ice, it's not going to smoke as much. But yeah, when it's in touch with liquid, it smokes more. So you could also hide that in the bottom of your glass if you wanted to, and then it would do more. I like putting it on top because if you're putting it in a cocktail, it's going to take time to evaporate. You want to be very careful not to consume it or to have anybody that is drinking your cocktail consume it either. It's equally as dangerous inside your body. So you want to either be able to see it so you can make sure it has evaporated, because sometimes it'll get into these small little chunks. You might suck it up through a straw, very dangerous. The other way you could do this, if you wanted to make it immediately drinkable, but equally dramatic, you could set this on like the little platform, maybe with like some astroturf or something, and set the ice underneath the actual glass, and it'll create smoke around it without having to worry about consuming it. But that is 3 broomsticks. All right. So we've got our tiki cocktail, or our tiki class cocktail. Let's get back to the clarifying, shall we? So let's see. We have this curd forming. If you guys can see that. It's a little harder to see. But so this is a layer of curds that is staying in the strainer, and just little drops of liquid are coming out. Now this, I don't know if you guys can tell. Let me see, maybe if I put them next to each other. But this is the curdle, and this is how it's coming out right now. So it's already clearer, but this has still only been through once. So once that finishes dripping all the way through, I'll pour this through, and then we'll do it a second time. So total, I think this took, I want to say like 8, maybe 12 hours. I just put it in my fridge and forgot about it, like on the top shelf. So it is a lengthy process, but I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. This back here, so you guys can see. Once your cocktail is clarified, you end up with a clear liquid that you can then bottle. Look how clear that is, guys. See how pretty? That's the same cocktail, I swear. Same exact recipe, same exact process, this clear. Look at that. See on my fingers? Ooh. So the cool thing about this, it's shelf stable. Well, it's stable. I would keep them refrigerated, but it is pretty much almost impossible for it to go bad. There are like these crazy accounts of how they found like milk punches, which is what this is, that have been around for, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years, and they're still drinkable. So the cool thing is if you're having company over or you just want to be lazy, make a huge batch of this, put it in your fridge, and then you just essentially have a ready to drink cocktail anytime you want. So how do we serve it? You could just pour this in a glass and go. We're not lazy like that. We're going to make it cool. Does it taste sweet of whey? Very good question. And shimmer that shit. Also a very good suggestion. Let's get to it. So you could shimmer it. It's a fantastic suggestion. Now I will say this. If you're going through all the effort to clarify a cocktail, you have to have a purpose, right? It's not just, oh, I clarified a cocktail. It's also got to look cool, right? So that's why clear ice is like doubling up on that transparency concept, makes it look super interesting. You could add a shimmer and then it would be less cloudy. It'd just be like a sparkle in it. And that would also be really pretty. Again, matching colors. What I can do, if you want to see what that looks like, because I'm going to have more of this later, I will show you how I'm going to serve this one. And then I'll shimmer one for you guys and I'll post that picture in the Facebook account the Facebook group that we have, so you guys can see that too. So the sweet of whey. So when you have milk or a dairy product that you acidulate to turn into like cheese or curdle, like we did, you usually get solids, which become the curds, the cheese, or whatever the product is, and then you get whey. And whey is kind of the runoff. And it has, depending on your milk, depending on the product that you're getting your whey from, you can also get whey from yogurt. It's going to have a different flavor. The one from milk is definitely sweet without having that paste kind of quality, that astringent, drying kind of texture that yogurt whey has. It also has a much nicer aroma than yogurt, so your cocktail's not going to smell like yogurt. I will say that I tried this without adding the Montenegro. The cocktail was nice, but the smell of the milk was a little bit strong, in my opinion. And that just might be my choice of ingredients. But I'm using pretty strongly scented ingredients: whiskey, sour apple, cranberry juice, and the milk still kind of came through, but not in an unpleasant way. Once I added the Montenegro, I felt like the aroma was much more appealing. And then the whey flavor is there, but not in a sense that somebody would drink it and be like, this has milk in it. It's just kind of sweet. Like, it doesn't taste like milk. It doesn't taste like dairy. It's just like, this is interesting. So yes and no. It's got the sweetness from the whey, but not in a way that you expect. So I don't know if that properly answers your question. I can think of other ways to babble about the flavor, but we'll do that. So good information. I didn't know that if you shake a clarified cocktail, it's going to get foamy and cloudy. So don't do that, guys. Don't do what I did. You will ruin all of that hard work that you put in. We stir clarified cocktails. And the honest truth is, usually you shake a cocktail that has juices. That's usually like the first thing. If your cocktail has juice, or your cocktail, you don't know whether to shake or to stir, all alcohol-based cocktails that are just like all booze, like an old fashioned or a Manhattan or a martini, those are usually stirred. Whereas things that have juices, specifically citrus, do better with a shaking method because it helps aerate those juices and then kind of combine those flavors a lot better. There's exceptions to every rule, but this one you definitely want to stir if you're trying to maintain the clarification of your pretty cocktail. So, considering, I hate this bottle, it's so hard to open. Plus, it's been just chilling. This, just so you guys know, I made this cocktail 3 weeks ago. So still totally fine, and it's almost a month old. So if the original cocktail was 1 ounce of cranberry, 1 ounce of apple whiskey, 1 ounce of apple schnapps, and 1/4 ounce of Montenegro, that would mean our cocktail is 1 ounce and 3/4. So that's what I'm going to measure out. I'm going to measure out 1 ounce and 3/4 exactly into a mixing glass. Now, the reason I wanted to do a clarified cocktail, other than just to do it, I really like Boba. I like the texture. It's like having little snacks in the drink. Some people aren't very fond of it, but I am. There's all different kinds. I really love exploding boba because then it's snacks that just like pop in your mouth like a gusher candy, but way cooler and a lot better flavor. Popping boba is a lot harder to find. The regular boba can be bought almost at any Asian grocery store and online. So I just got regular boba, which because we're doing witchy themes, I'm calling frog eggs. But it's just these little gelatinous, chewy little balls. And I thought it would look super creepy in this cocktail because it's a witchy cocktail. So clarifying the cocktail is going to help you see all the little frog eggs sitting on the bottom of this little tadpole of the cocktail. So I have my liquid in here. I'm going to ice my mixing glass. And so I don't know, you could probably stir this. Everybody's different. Some people like to count the amount of stirs. Some people like to sting. Some people like to time it. I just kind of wing it, to be fairly honest. I kind of know what I'm looking for, so that's kind of the thing. Like I've done, every cocktail is different, so I'm looking for a specific temperature that I get that I gauge by taking my mixing glass. I don't know, what are we on? 10, 15 seconds. I think I'm on about 45, maybe 50 stirs. Good. So I'm going to put this off to the side, get our little cocktail glass. I'm going to put some frog eggs first. On the bottom of the glass. There, a little nest. And then strain this cocktail right over my frog. And considering that I'm not at the wash line, which is the brim of my glass, I'm gonna have more eggs or more boba, which makes me incredibly happy. Now I will say this cocktail is something I would drink as a double anyway, just because I really like it. I think the flavor is really nice. And it's a sipper, right? It's closer to like a Negroni or an old fashioned. It's not something that you're gonna slam. So larger quantity is fine because I'm going to sit and take some time to drink. But if you wanted to make like little taster ones, then you could do this recipe. I drank it as a double. You could drink it as a single. You could drink it as a quadruple. Do whatever you want. So I'm going to bring it over so you can see. And if you don't want to clarify this cocktail, you don't have to. Just mix all the stuff together. Don't do the milk process, and then just drink it. And it's still equally as tasty. And then you can't see the crazy little eggs. How creepy that is, guys. So exciting. That's a clarified cocktail. So it's a lot easier than they make it sound. It's just a really lengthy process. So like anything, if you're going to take time to do something and it takes that much time, make sure you have like enough of a result that you're happy. Not like you made enough for 2 cocktails and you're like, oh, I really wish I had another one. Just go ahead and make like, I don't know, 6 or 8 of them. And then keep them in a pitcher or in a bottle, repurpose like a wine bottle or an empty liquor bottle that you have, and then just have a bottle of this ready to drink cocktail. Take it to your next party if that's a thing you're doing. But that is Bippity, Boppity, Boba for garnish. The garnish is in the glass. This is an ungarnished cocktail because it's got the eggs in the bottom. So yeah, you can't smell the milk. I know. Wait, scroll back up. Oh, the question is, do they make frogs encased in a sucker? So I've been having these conversations lately with some of my virtual friends about the crazy candy that you can find in Texas, a lot of which is really cool at Halloween time. We have suckers that encase scorpions and worms and crickets. Unfortunately, no, they do not make a frog one. I'm assuming that would not be as sanitary or very hard to do. They do not make frog suckers, but that would be rad if they did. If you could find maybe like, I don't know, a lily pad glass at an Asian store, perhaps, that might be a kind of cool take on this, make it really like pond-like. But no, unfortunately, no frog suckers, so we can't use that as a garnish for this cocktail. They do make boba in different colors. This one is just kind of clear, and I got it because I liked it, that it looked kind of like tadpole eggs. but you can find it in multicolor, like rainbow. You can find it in like a dark brown or black. The black one is really common. They also come in different sizes. These ones are tiny, they make bigger ones. I think the big ones get up to the size of about a penny, so it's pretty hefty. These are fairly tiny. So lots of different options here. You can skip the boba altogether. You can do multicolored boba. You can do a different cocktail altogether and clarify it. So the one thing for you to be able to clarify, if you are using the dairy method, I'm not very familiar with the agar method. I plan on exploring it later and hopefully bringing that to you guys as well. But if you are using the dairy method, you need the acidity to curdle that milk. So your cocktail needs to have a certain amount of acidity. It can't just have like a splash of lime. So if you look at the ratios that I did, now cranberry juice is not the same as lemon or lime juice. It's a different acidic or a different pH. So you can clarify almost anything, right? You can clarify a Bloody Mary, you can clarify a daiquiri, you can clarify a mojito. There's a lot of things you can clarify. So if you have a specific one that you want to try and you're not sure if it will curdle, the alcohol will also help curdle the milk, right? So some people have clarified some cocktails without the addition of any kind of acid, but they clarify better with it, at least in my opinion. If you just put whiskey and milk and the whiskey quantity is a lot higher than the milk quantity, it's gonna curdle, right? Which is why you can't make like a white Russian with just any like proof of coffee liqueur, which we went over when I did like the dirty Russian or the dirty chai Russian, not the dirty Russian, the dirty chai Russian. So you could do it with just alcohol. It's just not going to clarify as well, in my opinion. And if you're going to go through all that effort, I mean, make sure it's more interesting of a cocktail than just like a shot of whiskey, I guess. But you definitely want to make sure it curdles. That's the key. So your alcohol content and your citric acid or your acidic level is going to need to be high. And yes, I should make my own alcohol boba. I have a lot of like alcoholic food things I'm thinking about messing around with. I want to make a Negroni mochi this week, and I also alcoholic boba sounds fantastic. You'd have to make like an alcoholic syrup and then soak them in it. They don't absorb as much flavor as you would think, but you could also use molecular mixology to create little boba balls that are filled with some form of a cocktail. That is something that's also very common. I'm not going to instruct you on that. That's really pricey to do. It's a lot of fun, but I just don't have the patience for it right now. This was a lot more entertaining because it just sits there, does its own thing. But that is our class for today. If you have any questions, especially about the clarifying, please ask me, because I tried a lot of different things before coming to this that I'm presenting to you. So maybe you take what I did and go further, but if you come to me first, then I can save you a lot of work in the beginning. So thank you for tuning in. I think next week we're doing ghosts. So stay tuned for that, ghosts and dead things. And yeah, we have the Facebook page if you want to join in there. Sometimes we have conversations and take polls about different things we do. That's the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour group on Facebook. The classes go live on the Underground Cooking Club page, and we have a YouTube channel now. Not a whole lot of subscribers, but that's cool. It makes it easier to find. They're all named, themed. It says specifically what recipes are in each class. It's a little bit easier to navigate than the Underground's page. So you can hop on there and subscribe to my channel or whatever it is to say. But thank you for tuning in if you are on Facebook. If you're not in Zoom, then you don't get to hang around for LG's side commentary, which is sure to be spectacular. So I will see y'all next Spooky Sunday. Bye.